Hey everyone, hope you're doing really well and welcome back to my channel, where today I am finally recording a video that I've actually been putting off for weeks now because I'm finally about to tackle the all-time hated, dreaded, despised verbal reasoning. Now, as some of you may already know, VR was my weakest section of the exam and the one that I really struggled with the most and tried to avoid as much as I could, but I thought it's not fair if I'm out here giving advice without actually getting, stuck in. So it's time for me to feel your pain again, and I hope someone benefits from my misery of doing these questions for you today live on camera using MEDIFY. If this is the first time you're watching one of my videos, welcome. I promise I'm not usually this pessimistic. My name's Julia and I've just finished my third year as a medical student at King's College in London. This is going to be my last UCAT video for the 2020 season, so I'm going to end it in style and I'll be announcing a third and final giveaway at the end of this video, so make sure you stay tuned for that. To start off with, I'm just going to really quickly go through the technique that I found most beneficial for tackling VR questions, but before I do that, if you haven't seen my last verbal reasoning video, go check it out first, because that's where I go through all the general tips and tricks that you should be aware of, and it'll be linked in the description below. As you'll see in a bit, my number one piece of advice would be not to bother trying to read or even skim the passage before you go to the question, because unfortunately we have no luxury time here whatsoever. So what I do is I go straight to the question, read that slowly and carefully, and within the question pick out a key word or phrase that is then what I use to try and locate the answer within the passage. Ideally, you want the key word or phrase to be something that's easily recognisable within a block of text. So for instance, something containing a capital letter, such as names, places, months, or something containing a number such as dates or any form of numerical data. Once you've chosen the keyword, what you want to do next is a super quick skim and scan of the passage. So here you need to be speedy, but you also need to be precise. So what you do is you start at the top and work through line by line, looking for that keyword that you chose from the question. Once you've found that keyword within the passage, what you want to do next is you want to read the sentence before, of, and after the keyword to basically understand the context that it's in, and hopefully the answer to your question should be in those 3 or 4 lines without having to read the whole passage. If you're still not sure that you found the answer, then don't worry, just pick up where you left off from that keyword and continue scanning line by line, because unfortunately more often than not the keywords will be dotted more than once throughout the passage. Now that's the sort of general technique that I'll be using, but I'll also be explaining my thought process as I go along. So without further ado, let's just jump straight in and log into MEDIFY. Okay, so I've just opened up the first verbal reasoning question on MEDIFY, and I think already I'm slightly overwhelmed by the amount of text because I know I'm a slow reader. So this is exactly what I was talking about. If I was to sit and read through this first, it would take me at least like 2-3 minutes, which I just don't have in the exam. So I'm just going to go straight to the question and read here. It's a true-false question. It says, Larry Zeiger went to the private Lafayette High School. So here you've sort of got 2 keywords, Larry Zeiger, which just looking at the first sentence here, I'm guessing this whole sort of article is about him, and private Lafayette High School. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scan for this Lafayette High School within the passage, starting at the top. I'm just scanning, and I found it here in the first paragraph. So as I said, what you want to do is you want to read the sentence before, of, and after. So here it says, his parents were Orthodox Jews. King was educated at Lafayette High School, a state school in Brooklyn. So he was educated at Lafayette, but the key word here is that it was a state school, not a private school. And so the answer to this question would be false. I just want to quickly double check that Larry Zeiger is Larry King, which it does say in the first sentence here, Larry King, born Lawrence Harvey Zeiger. So I'm confident that's the same person, and I'm going to go with false and move on to the next question. Second question reads, he first went on air in his 50s. Okay, so I did earlier say that if you have a question with a number to use that as a keyword, but obviously in his 50s suggests that we're going to have to do some mental maths with dates probably. So I'm going to try and find out when he first went on air. So here in the second paragraph it says his first broadcast was on 1st of May 1957 and he was born in 1933. So 57 minus 33 is 24? So I think he would have been 24. I'm just going to quickly read the sentence before and after. So it says, however, when one of the station's announcers abruptly quit, King was put on the air. Okay, so it is definitely talking about King, and it was the 1st of May 1957. So no, he was not in his 50s, so again we're going to go with false. Next question reads, Larry King worked his way up to the position of disc jockey at WAHR. Okay, so the key word here is disc jockey at WAHR. So I think I saw that here in the second paragraph. I'm just going to scan for disc jockey. To continue the sentence that we read from earlier, it says in 1957 he worked as a disc jockey from 9 a.m. to noon. But let's read the sentence before, because here it says something about in WAHR he had been hired to do cleaning and other miscellaneous tasks. So he was still working within the company before he was promoted to disc jockey. So I guess in that sense you can assume that he sort of did work his way up, because he went from doing cleaning and other miscellaneous tasks to actually presenting. So I'm going to go with true for that one. Bobby Darin is a famous singer. So keyword here is Bobby Darin. So let's try and find that. So I found Darin here in this paragraph. Let's read the sentence before. So he began doing interviews in mid-morning show of this. He would interview whoever walked in, and his first interview was with one of the waiters. 2 days later, Bobby Darin, in Miami for a concert that evening, walked into Pumpernickel's having heard King's radio show. Okay, so from these sentences we know that Darin is a celebrity and that he was in Miami for a concert. However, I think just from these two sentences you can't assume that he definitely is a singer, because yeah, although he might be performing at a concert, he could be like a drummer or backup dancer, we don't know. So although he is a celebrity, we can't know for sure if he is a singer if it doesn't explicitly say so in the text. So I'm going to go with can't tell for this one. And I'm going to go ahead and mark the test, and thankfully we've got them all correct, so I'm just going to go ahead. Second question is a bit of a nasty one. I really don't like these questions because they're the comprehension ones, which take like 3 times as much time to do, but we're going to use the same technique and hopefully do what we can. So the question reads, according to the passage, Mauna Kea is a dormant volcano on the island of Haiti. Okay, so let's have a read of this Mauna Kea. Dormant volcano on the island of Hawaii, so that's wrong. Is 4,207 meters tall, standing at above sea level. Okay, so this shows to read the whole sentence and not fall into the classic UCAT trap of having the second half of the sentence mean something else. So it's 4,207 meters above sea level, which doesn't mean it's that tall. So next option has the highest point in the state of Hawaii at its peak. Let's continue reading. Its peak is the highest point in the state of Hawaii. Does that mean the same thing? Has the highest point in the state of Hawaii at its peak. Its peak is the highest state. That means the same thing. And just really quickly, the last option says last erupted 1,000 years ago, and I can see the last sentence here says last erupted 6,000 to 4,000 years ago, so that's definitely wrong. So I'm going to go with this one here. Next question, ancient Hawaiians living on the slopes of Mauna Kea. I really hate these questions because it's literally like searching for 4 different things, but let's go. Relied on hunting native species for food. Okay, so let's try and look for maybe food or hunting. So this second paragraph talks about ancient Hawaiians, and it says ancient Hawaiians living on the slopes of Mauna Kea relied on its extensive forests for food. It doesn't say anything about hunting, so I'm going to cross that one out. Lived completely as an independent community. Anything here about independence? Not that I can see. What's the next option? Quarried the dense rocks on the side of Mauna Kea to make tools. I did see something about tools. Here, tool production. The sentence reads, and quarried the dense volcano-glacial basalts on its flanks for tool production. Okay, what's a flank? A flank is like a side. So, quarried the dense rocks on the side of Mauna Kea to make tools. Quarried the dense, you can assume these are rocks, on its flanks, so on the side for tool production, to make tools. Yeah, that makes sense. Just really quickly, what's the last option? Played an important role in Hawaiian mythology. Can I see the word mythology anywhere? No. So I'm running tight on time, but I'm just gonna hope for the best. I think that's the right answer. I don't see anything about them living completely as an independent community either. So I'm gonna go with the quarried dense rocks. Next question says, which ecological area of Mauna Kea has now been largely cleared by the former sugar industry? So I'm going to try and look for sugar industry. Here, now mostly cleared by the former sugar industry. Okay, so read the sentence before. Mauna Kea can be ecologically divided into 3 sections. Okay, says an alpine climate at its summit, a saguaro sand-rich resinous forest on its flanks, and an Aikaikoa metrosideros polymorphia forest, now mostly cleared by the former sugar industry at its base. Okay, so this is confusing because it's giving you 3 options, or the last option says all 3 ecological areas, and the sentence describes the 3 ecological areas. But let's read that again. And in Aikaikoa metrosideros polymorphia forest, now mostly cleared by the former sugar industry at its base. So the at its base means that the now mostly cleared by the former sugar industry is only talking about that 3rd location. So I'm going to go with this one at the base of the volcano. Not all 3, but that's a tricky question. Next question. Feral species developed on the mountain because. So what are the 4 options? Court cases forced the Hawaiian Department of Land and Natural Resources to eradicate all feral species on the mountain. Many of the animals that European settlers introduced into the 18th century became feral. The number of native species declined, or there were no humans left on the mountain to look after them. So feral species developed on the mountain because. Let's search for feral species. Okay, so I found the term feral species here in the last sentence of the 2nd paragraph, but the sentence just reads, in recent years, concern over the vulnerability of the native species has led to court cases that have forced the Hawaiian Department of Land and Natural Resources to eradicate all feral species on the mountain. So that's talking about eradication, not about why they developed. So let's continue searching. Here, found another feral. So, when Europeans arrived in the late 18th century, settlers introduced cattle, sheep and game animals, many of which became feral and began to damage the mountain's ecological balance. Okay, what are the options? So, not this one. Many of the animals that European settlers introduced in the 18th century became feral. Yes, that is true, based on this sentence here. So, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next question. Oh no, these are the worst types of questions. Okay, all of the statements about astronomical observation on Mauna Kea are definitely true apart from. Okay, construction of telescopes on this sacred mountain is a controversial topic. Mauna Kea's summit is the best site in the world for astronomical observation. The Mauna Kea observatories are the largest of their kind in the world, and 13 telescopes in total have been built at the summit. Which paragraph here talks about astronomical observation? I think it's this last one here. Yeah. So, is it a controversial topic? It says their construction on a sacred landscape continues to be a topic of debate. So, that is true. Mauna Kea's summit is the best site in the world for astronomical observation. It says here is one of the best sites in the world for astronomical observation. So you cannot say that it's the best. So that wouldn't be true. So I'm going to go with that one. I'm not even going to bother reading the other 2 options because I don't have the time. And so if this was a real exam, if I think I found the right answer, just pick it and go, because especially in these longer questions, you just don't have the time to and ah about it. And I think you're better off trying to conserve the time for a true false can't tell question, which I think is easier to get the mark for than these ones, because these are very wordy and are there to catch you out, in my opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the test now. Yes, we got them all correct. Okay. So, gonna go ahead and do question number 3. Okay, so the third question we've got is unfortunately another comprehension question. So let's just jump straight in. It says, based on this article, which of these statements is false? Townsend lived in 3 different states during his life. Okay, that's going to be difficult. Let's try and see where he started and where he ended up. So, born in Iowa, Michigan, so that's 2 places. Then El Paso, Texas, so 3 places. El Paso, Iowa. Okay, so those are the only 3 places that I see, so I think that is going to be true. The next option says Townsend played competitive football during his life. The first sentence here says Townsend was an American football player, lawyer and politician, so yeah, he did probably play competitively. Townsend failed to complete his studies due to poor eyesight 3 times during his life. I have a feeling that might be false, but let's see. So let's scan for eyesight. In the first paragraph here, so he was forced to quit his studies once. He was unable again to complete his studies due to failing eyesight twice. Is there a third time lucky? Not from what I can see. So I'm going to go with the third option. The fourth option says Townsend was a sportsman as well as an academic person, which we saw in the first sentence, that he was a lawyer, politician and a football player, so we know that that's true. So I'm quite confident that number 3 is the correct answer. Next question says, which of these statements is most likely to be true based on the text? Frederick Townsend ran against a Republican candidate for the country attorney post. Okay, so let's try and find where he got into politics, who he was running against, which I think is this third paragraph here. So he was nominated as a Democratic Party's candidate for county attorney of Monroe County, Iowa. Blah blah blah. Does it say who he was up against? Not that I can see. So remember, this is tricky because it says most likely to be true. So unfortunately, based on that, it's unlikely that you'll find a definitive answer within the text, and it's more about sort of guessing and making an assumption based on what you do read. Number 2 says Townsend went into politics in 1888. Again, if we go to this third paragraph here, in 1890, he was nominated as Democratic Party's candidate, and it's when he had returned to Iowa, so I doubt he went into politics. Let's just read the sentence before. So he graduated in Michigan in 1888, returned to El Paso where he formed a law partnership with his brother. Nothing about politics, so option number 2 is probably also incorrect. Townsend worked in the mercantile business as a clerk. Okay, so keyword is mercantile business. Let's scan from the top. I think I found it here. So he moved to El Paso, Texas, where he worked in the mercantile business and also part-time in the law office of his brother, Judge J.E. Townsend. Okay, it doesn't really go into what he did in the mercantile business. I don't think it's fair to assume that he was necessarily a clerk, so what's the last option? Townsend broke his partnership with his brother in 1890 or before that. So what happened in 1890? He returned back to Iowa to begin his own law practice there. What happened to the partnership? It doesn't really say. But the sentence before says he graduated from Michigan in 1888 and returned to El Paso where he formed a law partnership with his brother under the name Townsend and Townsend. So he'd created this partnership with his brother in 1888 in El Paso. 2 years later he moved to Iowa to begin his own law practice there. So I think it's fair to assume that he would have broken the partnership with his brother. I think it's really difficult to say that the first 3 options were true based on the text, so that's why I'm going to go with number 4, even though I'm not 100% confident, but it's asking most likely to be true. Yeah, okay. I'm going to go with that. Next question. How old was Townsend when he set up his own law office? So it says here, it was in 1890. When was he born? Born in 1862, so a bit of mental maths. 1890 minus 1862, so that makes him 28. double check that there's no months that they've mentioned. When's his birthday? It doesn't say exactly, because I reckon that would have been a very, very likely trap that they would have done, where they would have like messed up with the months that he's either a year older or younger, especially because all of the options are so close to each other. But I don't see any specifications for his exact date of birth. Okay, fine, just guess and go. Which of the following statements would be the most appropriate conclusion of the passage? Gosh, again, with these questions, they just want you to read the whole thing, which you just don't have time for. But from what we've read, Townsend was a prodigy at college football who gave it up for law. I don't think it said anything about him giving it up, because he was forced to quit his studies due to failing eyesight, so no. Frederick Townsend followed his family's footsteps in going into law, maybe. The Townsend family were very influential in Iowa, maybe. Although his poor vision posed difficulties in his life, Townsend became a lawyer and a politician. Yeah, I think the last option would be the most appropriate conclusion of the passage, because although the other options are true, I think the overall conclusion sort of talks about how he really struggled with his eyesight, had to repeat his studies, and then he became a lawyer and a politician despite everything going on. So I'm going to go with option number 4. Next, mark test, fingers crossed. And thankfully we've got them all correct. So next question, this might be my last one. Thankfully, the last question that's loaded up is a true, false, can't tell question, so hopefully we'll end on a high note. Let's just go straight to the question. It says, during the riots, Ed Miliband was the leader of the Labour Party. Okay, so let's have a scan for either Ed Miliband or Labour Party leader. So in this second paragraph here, it says, in the parliamentary debate during the riots, David Miliband, the Labour leader, called on Cameron to reconsider cuts to the police. So you can assume that the Labour leader was David Miliband, not Ed Miliband. Also, just really quickly as a side note, if you ever read an article where you feel like you might already know the answer to the question without having to read the passage just based off of your own knowledge, I'd recommend just double checking if it is within the passage, because sometimes the information in the passages might be intentionally wrong to mislead you, or perhaps it's not mentioned within the passage at all, so the answer would be can't tell. But in this case we're going to go with false, because it says that the Labour leader was David Miliband at the time. The next question says, the riots were in part fuelled due to the lack of policemen on the streets. Okay, so it's difficult to pick out a key word, so let's just sort of have a hunt for maybe lack of policemen or what caused the riots. In the first paragraph, all it says is that the riot started in Tottenham because of the fatal shooting of Mark Duggan. It doesn't really say if the lack of policemen fueled the riots. It does say in the first sentence of the first paragraph that David Cameron stated that a change in police strategy is appropriate following what may feel to be an inadequate response to the rioting. So that suggests that there weren't enough policemen on the streets to respond to the rioting, but that isn't necessarily synonymous with fueling the riots, if that makes sense. So I can't see anywhere, just through scanning, if it does mention anything about what necessarily fueled the riots, apart from, I think here I saw something to do with social media services, but nothing about policemen. So I'm going to go with can't tell for this one, because it could be, but it's not specified within the passage. Third question says, it is likely that George Osborne thought the riots were mainly caused by poverty. Okay, so let's find George Osborne. Okay, so in the second paragraph here, it says, Chancellor of the Exchequer George Osborne described the communities where the rioting occurred as being left behind and cut off from the economic lifeblood of the rest of the country, and called for solutions to the deep-seated social problems. What's important in this question is that it says it is likely. So it's not asking you to find a definitive answer, it's just sort of asking you to speculate based on what he said, which I think by the sounds of this, if he's saying they were cut off from economic lifeblood of the rest of the country, I think you can assume that he probably is talking about those living in poverty. So I would say that it is likely that that is what he believed, so I'm going to go with true for this one. And finally, the last question says the police used Facebook to communicate with each other during the riots. So let's just do a quick scan of Facebook, which I think I saw in the second paragraph here. The sentence reads, one avenue the Prime Minister is said to be considering is changing regulations on social media services like Twitter, Facebook and BlackBerry Messenger, the latter of which was used for communication between groups of rioters. Okay, so not police. Let's carry on reading just in case it says anything further down to do with Facebook, which I don't see. I want to go with can't tell, because the rule that I've always said is that if it's not in the passage, then you can't assume. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the test, and hopefully we've ended on a high. And thankfully we have got all the questions correct. Okay, so I think the main takeaway points from this video are probably number one, don't bother reading the passage before the question, because you're going to end up having to scan the passage either way when you're looking for the answer to the question. So I wouldn't waste those 10 seconds trying to like skim and scan and like get a gist of what the passage is about. Just go straight to the question, read that first, and then have a look at the passage. I think point number two would probably be to be cautious of the language used in the question. So if you've watched my previous verbal reasoning video, you'll know that there are two categories of words that can be used, which can be mild mitigating terms such as likely, can, might, some, and you've got the extreme definitive terms like must, always, definitely. So just be aware that if you have a mild mitigating term in a question, for example, if a question asks you what is the likely opinion of someone mentioned in the passage, just know that you don't have to have that opinion written word for word, and it's more about sort of understanding the language and the tone used in the passage and then coming to a conclusion of what that person would have thought based on the information given. So I think I'm gonna call it a day there and move on to more exciting stuff like the giveaway. Now I am super excited to announce that MEDIFY have been extremely generous and allowed me to gift two-week passes for their amazing UCAT course, where you have access to all of the question banks, so all of the questions that you've seen me do in these videos, hundreds of hours of live video tutorials and worked answers, as well as super helpful videos going through each topic within each subject of the UCAT exam and the ability to track your progress. So all of that will be available for you to win, and all of the details on how to enter will be linked in the description below, so make sure you check it out. If you are still revising for the UCAT, best of luck, keep practicing, keep grinding. I promise it's worth it in the end, and there's not long left now. One last final massive good luck for the UCAT exam from me, and I hope to see you very soon. Bye.